Some evil kids remind us that evil doesn't always wear the face of an adult, and that the potential for darkness can reside even in the most unexpected places. From Alyssa Bustamante, who brutally murdered her 9-year-old neighbor just to see what it felt like to kill, to Nehemiah Grigo, who coldly shot and killed his entire family, the capacity for violence in young minds can be shocking. But you won't believe what Melinda Loveless and her friends did to a 12-year-old girl. It's a crime that will leave you horrified. Let's start. Aiden Fui. This Florida teenager committed a truly horrifying crime back in 2021. Aiden Fui was just 14 years old when he brutally murdered his 13-year-old classmate, Tristan Bailey. The horrific incident happened on May 9, 2021. Tristan was last seen alive in the early hours of that morning, and her body was found later in a wooded area not far from her home. What happened to her was nothing short of gruesome. Fui lured Tristan into the woods and then stabbed her an unimaginable 114 times. Just let that sink in. 114 times. Nearly half of those wounds were defensive injuries to her arms, hands, and head, showing how desperately she tried to fight him off. What made the whole thing even more chilling was Fuchi's behavior afterward. He posted a selfie from the back of a police car, holding up a peace sign with the caption, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" That level of callousness and lack of remorse left people completely stunned. Originally, Fui was charged with second-degree murder. The charge was bumped up to first-degree murder because the attack was clearly premeditated. On March 24th, Aiden Fui was charged as an adult and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He is currently serving his sentence at Suwannee Correctional Institution. And while the murder committed by Fui is horrific, what I'm about to tell you next will send chills down your spine. Bever Brothers. The Bever brothers, Robert and Michael, committed one of the most disturbing family murders in recent history on July 22, 2015, in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. These two teens, who were 18 and 16 at the time, brutally attacked their own family in what can only be described as a horrific massacre. That night, the brothers went on a killing spree inside their home. Armed with knives, they methodically murdered almost every member of their family. They started with their parents, David and April Bever, stabbing them multiple times. Then they turned on their younger siblings. 5-year-old Victoria, 7-year-old Daniel, and 12-year-old Christopher were all viciously killed in the attack. The boys even attempted to kill their 2-year-old sister, but thankfully, she survived the attack. Amid the chaos, their 13-year-old sister, Crystal, managed to survive despite being severely injured. She was stabbed multiple times, but survived as she faked being dead while her brothers were killing others in the house. When the police arrived, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare, with blood everywhere and the brothers attempting to flee into the woods behind their house. Michael and Robert Bever had a twisted plan. They weren't just satisfied with killing their family. They had planned to continue their killing spree, intending to murder more people and even become notorious serial killers. Thankfully, they were caught before they could carry out any more of their horrific plans. The Bever brothers were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Next up is another kid who killed his family. It is not yet clear whether it was by an accident or pre-planned. Kyle Allwood. On the night of April 6, 2019, in the small town of Goodfield, Illinois, just 9-year-old Kyle Allwood was involved in a horrific incident that resulted in the deaths of 5 of his own relatives. It all started with a fire. Kyle set his family's mobile home ablaze, and the flames quickly spread, trapping everyone inside. The fire claimed the lives of his grandmother, his uncle, his cousin, and his 2 young half-siblings, aged 2 and 1. The blaze was intense, and by the time firefighters arrived, it was too late to save them. What makes this case so heartbreaking is Kyle's age. He was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and several counts of arson. Given his age, the legal system faced a complex challenge in how to handle such a serious crime committed by someone so young. Ultimately, Kyle was declared unfit for trial. Coming up is the world's youngest serial killer who comes from India. Amarjit Sada. The story of Amarjit Sada is one of the most chilling and disturbing in criminal history, not just because of the crimes he committed, but because of how young he was when he did them. In 2007, at just 7 years old, Amarjit became known as the world's youngest serial killer, a title that carries a heavy, horrifying weight. Growing up in a small village in Bihar, India, Amarjit's first victims were members of his own family. His first murder was his 6-month-old cousin, followed by his 8-month-old sister. Both of these crimes were shockingly overlooked by his family, who chose to keep quiet about them, perhaps out of fear, shame, or disbelief that a child could be capable of such brutality. But the silence ended with his third victim, a neighbor's 6-month-old daughter. One day, while the baby's mother was busy, Amarjit took the infant away and committed the unthinkable. He led her to a secluded spot and, with no hesitation, ended her life in the same brutal manner as the others. When questioned, Amarjit showed no remorse, casually admitting to what he had done as if it were just another ordinary event in his day. In the interrogation room, serial killers ask for things from the police, police. Do you know what Sada asked for? He said, "Oh, before I start talking, before I confess to the crime so these families can get closure, maybe I can get a cigarette." Amarjit Sada was a minor at the time, so he was sent to a juvenile home. Nobody is aware of his current whereabouts. Next is a kid killer who committed unspeakable acts when he was just 17-year-old. T.J. Lane. On February 27, 2012, Thomas Michael Lane, then 17 years old, walked into his school's cafeteria with a .22 caliber handgun and opened fire on his fellow students. He killed 3 students, Dimitrios Pags, Russell King Jr., and Daniel Parmertor, and wounded 3 others. He was apprehended quickly. However, what made Lane's case particularly disturbing wasn't just the act itself, but the way he conducted himself afterward. During his court appearance, Lane shocked everyone with his chilling behavior. He showed no remorse for what he had done. Instead, he wore a white t-shirt with the word "killer" scribbled across it and smirked at the victims' families as he was sentenced. But what sent chills down everyone's spine was his parting words. As he addressed the courtroom, he turned to the victims' families and said, "The hand that pulled the trigger that killed your sons now to the memory, all of you." It was a statement so cold and vile that it left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. Lane received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole on March 19, 2013. However, on September 11, 2014, Lane, along with 2 older inmates, escaped from Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio. He was captured the following day, and the 3 men were transferred to a maximum security prison. Now let's talk about an evil girl who murdered her neighbor simply because she wanted to know what it felt like killing someone. Alyssa Bustamante. On October 21, 2009, at just 15 years old, Alyssa Bustamante brutally murdered her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, in St. Martins, Missouri. She lured Olton, a sweet, innocent girl, into the woods near their homes under the pretense of hanging out. But Bustamante had sinister plans. Once they were deep in the woods, she attacked Olton with chilling brutality. She strangled the young girl, slit her throat, and then stabbed her in the chest 8 times. The sheer violence of the act was shocking, but the most disturbing part was Bustamante's motivation. This wasn't a crime of passion or anger. She simply wanted to know what it was like to take a life. After the murder, Bustamante buried Olton's body in a shallow grave she had dug a week earlier, clearly premeditating the entire act. What's even more chilling is that Alyssa documented her feelings about the murder in her journal that night. She wrote, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the 'oh my god, I can't do this' feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. LOL." Bustamante was arrested shortly after Elizabeth's body was found. Consequently, she was convicted of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2024 for the murder charge. However, the armed criminal action conviction extends her sentence by 30 years, meaning she won't be eligible for release until 2054. It's not often you see a murderer uploading their confession on the internet, but that's exactly what the next killer kid did. Sierra Halseth. In April 2021, at just 16 years old, Sierra Halseth was involved in a brutal crime that led to the death of her own father, Daniel Halseth, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Halseth, along with her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, carried out the gruesome act. The 2 teens stabbed Daniel Halseth multiple times before setting fire to his home in an attempt to cover up their crime. The details are horrifying. Daniel suffered dozens of stab wounds in what was clearly a premeditated attack, but what really caught the public's attention was what Halseth and Guerrero did after the murder.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Day 3 after murdering somebody.
They recorded and posted a video on YouTube where they casually joked about the crime. In the video, they even referenced the murder. Halseth can be seen laughing in the background, showing a disturbing lack of remorse. Their behavior in the video was chilling, almost as if they were treating the entire situation as some kind of twisted joke. The couple was quickly apprehended while on the run in Salt Lake City, Utah. The evidence against them was overwhelming, from the video confession to the trail of clues they left behind. Consequently, both were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Coming next is probably one of the most feared kids in the world because of the truly disturbing and evil crimes he committed. Nehemiah Grigo. On January 19, 2013, Nehemiah Grigo murdered his entire family, his parents and 3 younger siblings, in the very home they all shared. It all started in the early hours of the morning. Armed with a .22 caliber rifle, Nehemiah first went to his mother Sarah's room. She was asleep when he coldly shot her in the head, but he didn't stop there. After killing his mom, Nehemiah moved on to his 9-year-old brother Zephaniah, who was in another room. He shot him multiple times, ensuring there was no chance of survival. Next were his 2 younger sisters, brothers, 5-year-old Jael and 2-year-old Angelina. Nehemiah shot both of them at close range. The brutality didn't end there. Later that day, when his father, Greg Griego, a local pastor, returned home, Nehemiah was waiting. He shot his dad too, killing him instantly. After the murders, Nehemiah hung around the house with the bodies for hours, as if nothing had happened. He even took the time to clean up and make plans to continue his killing spree at a local Walmart, but thankfully, that never came to fruition. Eventually, he drove to his family's church and initially tried to play it off like he had just discovered the gruesome scene, but it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Nehemiah confessed to the killings without much emotion, describing how he had been planning it for some time. He was angry at his parents and wanted to do something extreme. He was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 30 years served. The following feared kid in the world killed numerous people, but his parents also got harsher sentences. Ethan Robert Crumbley. A 15-year-old Ethan Robert Crumbley walked into Oxford High School in Michigan on November 30th, 2021, armed with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Without any warning, he started shooting at his classmates in a cold and methodical manner. 4 students, Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, Madison Baldwin, and Justin Schilling, lost their lives that day. 7 others, including a teacher, were injured. Ethan didn't hesitate as he fired at close range, turning the school hallways into a scene of chaos and bloodshed. Students had no time to react, and some were hit before they even realized what was happening. The entire shooting happened in about 5 minutes, and Ethan was quickly arrested. Investigators found disturbing evidence that he had been planning the shooting for a while. His drawings and social media posts were filled with violent imagery and dark thoughts. In March 2021, he sent several disturbing texts to his mother which claimed about demons and ghosts inside the home. In 2023, the teenager was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Moreover, Jennifer and James Crumbley became the first parents convicted in the U.S. mass school shooting. They were sentenced to at least 10 years in prison for not acting fast and reacting when there were numerous alarming signs. Next up is a twisted kid serial killer who started killing when she was just 10 years old, making her Britain's youngest serial killer. Mary Bell. In 1968, Mary Flora Bell killed 2 preschool-age boys at the age of 10 years in Newcastle, England. Her modus operandi? She'd inform her victims that they had a sore throat, which would massage before proceeding to strangle them. Mary's first victim, Martin Brown, was found in an abandoned house. She had strangled him with her bare hands. There were no signs of a struggle, which led investigators to believe that the boy might have been caught off guard or didn't realize the danger until it was too late. Mary left the scene without much thought, and initially, Martin's death was ruled an accident due to the lack of clear evidence. But just a few months later, Mary struck again. This time, she targeted 3-year-old Brian Howe. Mary lured Brian to a secluded area and strangled him. But this time, she went even further. Mary mutilated Brian's body with scissors, cutting his hair and carving an M into his stomach. The relatively small amount of force used to murder the child led the coroner to conclude the killer was another child. On Mary's 11th birthday, the 26th of May, she and her friend Norma broke into and vandalized a nursery in nearby Woodland Crescent. There she left 4 handwritten notes, and one of them stated, "I murder so that I may come back." Mary and Norma were arrested, and both girls underwent psychological evaluations. Mary was diagnosed with a psychopathic personality disorder prior to her trial, and while her accomplice Norma was acquitted of all charges, Mary was convicted of the manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility. She was released from custody in 1980 at the age of 23. Coming up are 2 young school shooters who committed the deadliest mass shooting at a middle school in U.S. history. Mitchell Johnson. It was 1998, and the Westside Middle School in Jonesboro, Arkansas, became an open hunting ground for 2 heartless killers. 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson and 11-year-old Andrew Golden killed 5 people, 4 students and 1 teacher, and injured 10 others. It was a meticulously planned massacre. Golden asked to be excused from his class, pulled a fire alarm, and then ran to join Johnson in a wooded area 100 yards away from the school's gym. By that time, Johnson had already transferred several weapons to a wooded area. When children and teachers came out of the school, the boys started firing indiscriminately, targeting anyone in sight. The scene was one of sheer horror, with bodies on the ground and blood everywhere. Golden and Johnson attempted to run back to the van and escape, but were later caught by the police. They were apprehended about 10 minutes after the shooting began. The boys' plan was to remain off-grid as they had enough food, sleeping bags, and survival gear stored in the van. In August 1998, both boys were sentenced to confinement until they reached the age of 21, which was the maximum sentence available under Arkansas law for minors under the age of 14. On July 29, 2019, Andrew Golden died in a head-on car crash. On the other hand, Mitchell Johnson has been in and out of prison ever since due to other crimes. Next up is a killer kid behind the 8th deadliest school shooting in the United States. Dimitrios Pags. On May 18, 2018, 17-year-old Dimitrios Pags walked into Santa Fe High School armed with a shotgun and a .38 caliber revolver. He began his attack in an art classroom where he opened fire without warning. The first shots were deafening, and the students inside had no time to react. Pags moved through the room, methodically targeting his classmates. He then continued through the school, firing at anyone in his path. 8 students and 2 teachers were killed in the carnage. One wounded victim told reporters the shooter walked into the classroom and pointed his firearm at another person, singing "Another One Bites the Dust" in between shots. He even spared some students' lives he liked. After shooting at the police and injuring one officer, Pags finally surrendered. In total, he killed 8 students and 2 teachers. Dimitrios Pags, charged with capital murder of multiple persons and aggravated assault of a public servant. However, he was found unfit to stand trial by 3 experts on November 4, 2019. Nevertheless, he has been in a state-run mental health institution since November 2019. The following most feared kid was just 12 years old when he committed a horrific crime. Lionel Tate. Lionel Tate was playing with a 6-year-old Tiffany eunuch in 1999 when something unexpected happened. The incident occurred in Florida, where Tate was left alone with Tiffany, a family friend, while his mother, who was babysitting the young girl, was upstairs. Tate claimed they were just playing, but what happened next was far from a game. In a shocking and violent outburst, Tate began to mimic wrestling moves he had seen on television. He grabbed Tiffany, threw her around, and ultimately stomped on her with enough force to cause severe internal injuries. The brutal assault left Tiffany with a fractured skull, a lacerated liver, and several broken ribs. She suffered massive internal bleeding, injuries that would have been agonizing. Tate's actions were so violent that the medical examiner later compared Tiffany's injuries to those typically seen in high-speed car crash victims. Lionel Tate was initially sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, in January 2004, a state appeals court overturned his conviction on the basis that his mental competency had not been evaluated before trial. This opened the way for Tate to accept the same plea deal he originally turned down, and he was released on 1 year's house arrest and 10 years probation. Since then, Tate has been arrested for armed robbery and is currently serving a 30-year sentence in the Charlotte Correctional Institution. Next up are 2 sinister kids who committed a horrific crime at a very young age. Evan Drake Savoy and Jake Lee Eakin. Evan Drake Savoy and Jake Lee Eakin, both just 12 years old at the time, committed a horrifying murder in 2003 that shocked the small community of Ephrata, Washington. Their victim was 13-year-old Craig Sorger, a boy with autism who thought he was simply out playing with his friends. The 3 boys were playing together in a park when the situation took a dark and violent turn. Savoy and Eakin attacked Craig, first dropping a large rock on his head, stunning and incapacitating him, but they didn't stop there. The boys then proceeded to stab Craig repeatedly with a knife, inflicting dozens of stab wounds across his body. Craig's injuries were gruesome. His body was found with over 30 stab wounds. Evan Drake Savoy and Jake Lee Eakin were later arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Eakin received a light sentence of 8 years in prison in exchange for the guilty plea. However, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to over 14 years in prison on April 28, 2005, as the judge ruled there was no room to allow for just a sentence of 8 years. On the other hand, Savoy received over 26 years in prison, the maximum sentence that could be imposed. The following case discusses the murders that happened in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Jasmine Richardson. In 2006, 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson sought the help of her 23-year-old boyfriend Jeremy Steinke in murdering her entire family, her parents, and her 8-year-old brother. On April 23, 2006, around 1 p.m., Jasmine and Steinke entered the Richardson home with a clear and deadly purpose. They started with Jasmine's mother, Deborah, stabbing her multiple times as she tried to fight back. Her father met a similar fate, struggling desperately to defend his family, but ultimately succumbing to multiple stab wounds. The most horrifying part came next. Jasmine's 8-year-old brother was found dead in his bed, where he had been savagely attacked. As Jasmine was nowhere to be found, it was feared that she might have also been a victim. However, she was arrested the following day with Steinke. The investigation revealed that the two had plotted the killings because Jasmine's parents disapproved of their relationship. She sent an email to her boyfriend stating, "It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." Jasmine was later sentenced to the maximum penalty of 10 years for a minor in Canada, while Steinke received a life sentence. Jasmine was released on May 6, 2016. Up next are 2 brothers who killed their father in one of the most brutal ways. Derek King. In 2001, Derek King and his brother Alex killed their father, Terry King, in cold blood. In a sickening murder that happened in the quiet town of Cantonment, Florida, the boys waited for their father to fall asleep before carrying out their sinister plan. They took an aluminum baseball bat and struck their father repeatedly with it, delivering fatal blows to his head. The attack was so brutal and quick that Terry King didn't stand a chance. After ensuring that Terry was dead, the boys tried to cover up their crime by setting fire to the family's home. They hoped the flames would destroy the evidence of what they had done, allowing them to escape suspicion. However, their plan didn't go as smoothly as they hoped. The fire department arrived quickly, and the evidence of the brutal murder was not entirely destroyed. The boys claimed that they committed the murder to end mental abuse, including being stared down and spanked. They would change their testimony several times. In 2002, Derek King was sentenced to 8 years in prison, while Alex received 7 years. Once released, both brothers lived separately, and in 2024, Alex died due to a drug overdose in Montana. The next most feared kid surrendered willingly after killing 9 students and a security guard. Costa Kmanovich. On the 3rd of May 2023, 13-year-old Costa Kmanovich opened fire on students and staff in Vladislav Ribnikar Model Elementary School in the Vrakar municipality of Belgrade, Serbia. His attack began early in the morning, and he first shot the school's security guard to ensure there would be no immediate interference to his evil plan. He then shot and killed 2 hall monitors that he saw in the hallway, both girls, after which he reloaded his gun while heading for his classroom. Upon entering the classroom, Kmanovich shot at the history teacher and then fired at numerous people, killing another 7, 6 of whom were girls. Another 5 students were wounded. He then ran through the hallway and into the courtyard, where he contacted the police. Kmanovich willingly surrendered and was detained, but at under 14, he was too young to face charges in Serbia. The firearms used were legally owned by his father. Kmanovich has since been placed in a psychiatric hospital in Belgrade. Now the next kid is someone who is a monster in the truest sense. Philip Chisum. On Oct. 22, 2013, a 9th grader at Danvers High School in Massachusetts named Philip Chisum committed one of the most twisted crimes. At just 14, he raped and murdered his 24-year-old math teacher Colleen Ritzer at Danvers High School before dumping her corpse behind the school. It was a premeditated murder as he arrived at school on that fateful day with several bags. The bags contained a mask, box cutter, gloves, and a change of clothing. He noticed Ritzer exiting the classroom toward the women's bathroom. He followed her into the bathroom, where he robbed, raped, and stabbed her 16 times in the neck with the box cutter. He then went out of the bathroom and walked outside to the parking lot. When he came back, he was wearing a new white t-shirt. He changed his clothes again and went to the bathroom to put her body into a recycling bin, which he dragged all the way to the wooded area behind the school. He was later arrested and indicted for the murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery. Chisum was tried as an adult and sentenced to serve at least 40 years in prison. Next is a teen who committed a brutal and senseless murder in 2019. Heavenly Aroyo. Heavenly Aroyo was just 15 years old when she fatally stabbed 68-year-old Ana Vasquez Rodriguez 70 times with the scissors in her bedroom. Maria's injuries were severe. She suffered deep wounds to her chest and abdomen, leading to her death. At the time of the killing, the only other person inside the home was the victim's grandson, who was playing a video game with a headset on. After killing the victim, the defendant showered, disposed of her clothing in a nearby dumpster, and told the victim's grandson that his grandmother wasn't well. When the grandson looked in on his grandmother, he immediately called 911, and police arrived shortly thereafter. At first, Aroyo claimed she was outside with the dog and witnessed a masked man running from the home, but while in custody, she made a confession. In 2023, Aroyo was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. The last most feared kid is who was the mastermind behind one of the most brutal killings in recent history. Melinda Loveless. Melinda Loveless, along with 3 friends, committed one of the most horrific crimes in 1992 that left a lasting impact on everyone who learned about it. The victim was 12-year-old Shanda Scherer, who was brutally tortured and murdered in a premeditated attack that lasted for hours. Melinda, driven by jealousy and rage, orchestrated the kidnapping of Shanda. She and her friends, Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence, lured Shanda from her home, convincing her to come with them under false pretenses. Once they had her in their control, the real nightmare began. They took Shanda to a remote location in the woods, where the torture started. For the next 7 hours, the girls subjected Shanda to unimaginable pain and terror. They beat her, stripped her, and burned her with a lighter. Melinda, who harbored the most intense hatred for Shanda, led the torment and encouraged the others to join in. The group cut Shanda's hair, taunted her, and even strangled her with a rope. But the cruelty didn't stop there. As if the physical torture wasn't enough, the girls eventually doused Shanda in gasoline and set her on fire, burning her alive. Pretty soon, all four were arrested and charged with Shanda's murder. Tackett and Loveless were each sentenced to 60 years in the Indiana Women's Prison. Tackett was released in January 2018, followed by 1 year of probation, and Loveless was released in September 2019. Rippey received a 60-year sentence with 10 years suspended and 10 years of medium supervision probation. Lawrence, in exchange for her cooperation, pled guilty to criminal confinement and was sentenced to 20 years. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, check out the suggested content on your screen by clicking one of the cards displayed.